Welcome to the School of Athens by Estelle and Leah.
Making philosophy more accessible to younger people.
Hi everybody, we're back.
I'm Estelle.
And I'm Leah. And today we're talking about a very important topic
called determinism
and free will. So we want to start by giving you a scenario. So basically, imagine someone kidnaps you and forces you to commit a crime. And after you commit the crime, you manage to escape, but the police still arrest you and people want to punish you for the crime that you committed. But obviously you feel that's unfair because you didn't commit the crime, by free will. You were forced to do it, right? So that's kind of the intro to the topic, like we do things, why we think we have free will. Because, for example, you would say that you didn't commit the crime by free will, obviously, because there was a cause, or someone that forced you to do it. But if we, apply that same concept to a different situation, you could say, yeah, I committed a crime because like my genetics impact me in a way that, make it more likely for me to commit a crime or something like that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that more later.
And also, I think there's a reason why often, like, for example, in TV shows or whatever, like, we sometimes feel sympathy for, like, the criminals or, like, the bad guys in the shows, because we can see, like, what led them to that place. If they had, like, a traumatic childhood or bad things happening in their life, like, we'd sympathize with them. And, like, if we were in the same position, we would have maybe done the same thing. So...
yeah, and that's because we think that everything has a cause, right? And this idea is called determinism, that we think everything is caused by something in the past.
So definition, I guess, of determinism is given the past, the present couldn't have been otherwise. It's all about like the present being affected by the past.
Exactly. And so, how does that influence free will? I mean, if you think about it, if every action you do has a cause, then, what are you really deciding? Like, if, for example, everything you do is caused by either your genetics or your upbringing or experiences you've had, like, you aren't really making a choice. Say you are choosing between, like, eating an apple or a banana or something, then something in your past, for example, a bad experience with apples or something like that already decided or predetermined what you are going to choose now. And you can go back like basically indefinitely and find causes for the causes that are now influencing your choices or everything that's happening basally.
Say I made like lettuce and mushrooms for dinner today, and I made that. I did actually.
Oh,
really good. I made that because that was the only thing that we had in our fridge. I guess just like one thing goes, there's always like a reason for why you do such a thing.
And so, I mean, there are a lot of people who have problems with the determinism because it's very hard to accept that you don't have free will, right? It seems wrong because when you're making a choice, you feel like you are in control, but really like what determinism says, and if you think about it, it makes sense, is that you aren't really making that choice like willingly. Like it's nothing about you that it's, or nothing that's not already somehow predetermined.
So in this moment, I guess like if I decide to suddenly stop doing a podcast, like I still have the choice to like continue, or like it seems like I still have free will, like to either like just jump out the window or just continue doing a podcast leading on to my normal life.
But it's like somehow like the way that your brain works is already is determined, and that already
actually it's quite funny because like on TikTok there's like a trend recently that's like when I remember I have free will, and someone just does something random, like starts like throwing some mushrooms around or something. But in a way that's still being like, you're still doing it to prove that you have free will, which is still being affected by something that's happened, like to prove that I have free will. If I jump out of the window right now, that's still being affected, the cause is still the discussion that we're having right now, you know?
But, now that, like, if you are going to accept determinism, say, or I mean, there's nothing really to accept. It's more like if you understand like how free will works or how determinism works. For example, there's this movement called hard determinism. What are you, and they say basically you can't hold people responsible for the actions that they can't really freely choose, right? For the hard determinists, they basically say that no one's responsible for anything they do. And that seems like so radical, but the
So like,
question is like, can you live in a society where no one's held responsible for what they're doing? Like, I don't think that's possible.
mm,
Let's go to libertarianism, right? That's another
yeah.
extreme view.
Libertarianism is like would say that free will does exist, right? So
Yeah, I mean, I think the equation is kind of either determinism is true or free will exists. And
yeah.
in the case of the hard determinists, they say free will doesn't exist. And in the case of, libertarians,
But they would think that determinism is false.
I think one of the main libertarian like ideas is, for example, that for humans it's different because we have a soul. So there's something else, in humans that makes the equation a little bit different. Difficult like to fit that into our worldview because then like when is your soul actually acting and when are you just forced to do things like that? Or when is it your genetics or whatever?
What exactly does a libertarian believe in?
A lot of people, I think, believe that there's a soul, and so that's what is basically making the decisions.
No, I think in this whole discussion, like, it's really important to define what free will is as well, because a lot of people they base their counter arguments on how they define free will. I think usually philosophers say like I could have done otherwise if in that situation. So say X is an action or something. So free will is that if someone freely does X, then they also could have refrained from doing X. Or like if I freely did X, then I must have been able to render it false that I did X. If I made lettuce and mushroom for dinner, then I could have also reframed, like not made lettuce and mushroom for dinner.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, like in a deterministic view, that would mean that you wouldn't be able to choose otherwise because there's a cause for what you are choosing. For example, I don't know, like whatever, like your mom always forced you to, I don't know, not buy enough groceries. So now that you didn't buy enough, you only have something left and you can only do that or whatever. Like that's a bad
Yeah.
example. But I don't even know why your mom would force you not to buy enough groceries. Like, that doesn't even make sense.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe my cat ate the groceries or something.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to explain determinism because there's like such an almost like molecular aspect, because I think it has a lot to do also like on a very basic level. It has a lot to do with how the, particles move in a certain moment or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
one of the criticisms or one of the maybe, counter arguments you could have for, determinism is quantum mechanics, because basically there's the possibility, right, that a certain like molecular atom or something, like I'm not a physics person, but is at different places at the same time, or there's always a probability that for example, an atom is at a certain place like at a certain time, so it's not defined, like it's not predetermined where it is, but it's like only, for example, there's like a certain probability that it's like 1 nanometer to the left or like 1 nanometer to the right or whatever.
Yeah.
And so obviously when we're talking about determinism on a very basic level, if you think about the neurons in your brain, for the decision you're making, it might be extremely important how the parts in your brain are moving. And so if there's a possibility that they are moving a different way, like in the same moment or in the same situation, then that means that they don't necessarily have a cause, right? So there's disconnection maybe. So basically the things in the past aren't directly causing what you're doing right now anymore. And that doesn't mean that you are choosing where the particles in your brain are, of course, but it does mean that it's not all like predetermined. Like there's a certain aspect of chance in every.
It's like the randomness of their like event.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so
also,
I probably made like a million science mistakes.
and also, I was thinking everything has a cause. Like if we go all the way back, say if we believe in the Big Bang theory, or like what caused the Big Bang theory, you know, like at the end of the day, like if you're like a religious believer, you'd say God or whatever.
Like what happened, and was it already sure in that moment that, yeah, I mean, that's so interesting to think about. Like what in that moment, in the Big Bang moment, in a deterministic worldview, it should have already been predetermined that we are making this podcast right now. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It couldn't have happened another way.
They talk about this with God as well. Like if God made everything, then like he would also know like what's gonna happen in 2 days or what's gonna happen in like 100 years. Also, like just taking the deterministic view as well. If God doesn't control like now, but like at least if he made everything in the first place, like everything would lead to this point.
I mean, especially if we think about like how, if we think all the way back to, you know, the Big Bang or any event in the past, especially then I find the quantum like theory argument very interesting, because that makes so much difference then, you know, like either it could have happened by chance another way or not. And
also, yeah, I was reading this book today, this fiction novel, and the storyline goes like this guy, like when he gets his powers, like they all see this sort of vision of their demise or like their downfall. And he sees this girl and they have like this romance thing or whatever. But like point is, like if he knows that this girl's gonna be his demise and he sets out to prevent her or like sets out to let it happen or prevent it, like how like
yeah, can we do that? Yeah,
the timeline is just confusing because he has the knowledge of something about the future, but does the future know that he has the knowledge that he'll know about the future?
Can you change your future? Like obviously like the determinists would say you can't.
Take another example, like this happens in My Little Pony as well. Twilight, like she has this power. I think in one of the episodes, she like her future self comes and speaks to her present self, and she tries to tell her something important, but she didn't have enough time to say it. And then the present self gets really like anxious about something bad that might happen in the future. So the present self tries to find a way to tell her past self that something might happen in the future, or like she ends up like trying to warn the past self, but then she didn't have enough time to warn the past self either. I don't know. I just find past, present, and future really interesting and confusing.
Yeah, me too. But that also is so difficult to, you know, answer, because then you think about like time loops. You know, can the future part in like different ways? Like if you see the future, then either there's like only one way and it's going to be exactly the same as you're seeing it, or there's like a different timeline, and all of a sudden, you know, you're on a different way because you saw what you saw.
Okay, let's circle back to compatibilism.
Like what the compatibilists do differently is that they just define free will differently. They say it doesn't really matter if an action was caused, or like it just needs to be caused in the right way. So say you are forced to do something, then this action is not caused in the right way. But if something in your past led you to have a certain desire to do something, then this action was caused in the right way, and then you're doing it freely. But like the problem is like what the definition of being caused in the right way. It's just super difficult. Like, where's the line? Like, if you're hypnotized, for example, to have a desire for something, then obviously, you're going to have that desire, but it's not really like free, right? Even by the compatibilist definition. And then like you circle back and say, yeah, but you know, the cause needs to be caused in the right way or whatever. Like, it doesn't really make sense. So
So to just add on to what Leah said about compatibilism, Simon Blackburn in Think talks about it quite well. So he uses like a thermostat as an example. And he said a thermostat controls the temperature by being part of the way in which the past controls the present and future. In this, like being part of and being taken part in this process that gives you the free will, gives you the responsibility. And what you said before about moral responsibility with the whole topic of free will, I think that's really important as well. I think there's like a distinction that we can make between, say, someone who's just like stupid and someone who's just lazy. Obviously, you'd think that a lazy one should take more responsibility or whatever for their actions or like for their lack of hard work in this case. Whereas the stupid one just didn't like it wasn't part of their, I guess, their system or their set. They didn't have the knowledge, whereas the lazy one just didn't use
but
their
I mean, that's like kind of the point, right? Because like I, for example, have a brother who's like extremely lazy. No, I'm kidding. But like, and I'm also a very lazy person, so you could argue that it's also like it also has to do with your genetics or
But I
I
think
don't know. I think like that's like kind of the point. Like, can you hold them responsible or can you hold me responsible for being lazy or not?
or it's like, say someone's about to jump off the roof of a building and you see them do it, and I don't know, you're maybe like a few floors under them and you're just lazy and you don't want to climb up the stairs and tell them to stop.
Okay, but I mean, that's kind of like a crazy scenario.
Yeah.
I mean,
Scenarios are
you
always
could
crazy.
argue that it's not your laziness, but your extreme like egoism that you can't even, I mean, that's like in the depths of compatibilism, I think, that we're talking right now. Because I feel like there's so many scenarios in which it's difficult to say like whether you're responsible for something or like you're not responsible for something. But like the main question, like do you have free will? Like doesn't that give you some sort of existentialist like crisis?
Yeah. At
Like
the end of
doesn't
the
it?
day,
Like
it always
actually,
comes back to the existentialist crisis.
right?
But like I think it's also a big thing when we're defining free will, like how whether we like the thought arises. If you see a girl off at the top of a roof, like maybe you just didn't connect the fact that they might be wanting to jump off the roof. Like
Yeah,
if the thoughts didn't arise, then would you still like assign more responsibility to the person?
mm-hmm.
Or would you still assign more responsibility to the person because the thoughts should have arise and it didn't?
Yeah. I mean that's like being caused in the right or wrong way. Like, I mean, if you really didn't have that thought, if your body basically forced you not to have that thought, or if your body didn't allow you to have that thought, then I guess for the compatibilists, you would say it's not out of a desire that you didn't go, but just weren't able to. Said like if you had the desire not to go and you were aware of the situation, then the
Yeah.
compatibilist might say, okay, you're still responsible. You still acted freely.
Yeah, it's just hard to define what was something that you could have done or something you weren't able to do at all. I think it's just hard to like set the boundaries or limits for that.
But yeah, no, like I want to come back though to the existential crisis thing, because I think that's such a problem for people when they're talking about determinism, right? But this is so crucial to us. Like, it's nothing you do. Like, that basically says none of the choices you make are yours. So you don't even, nothing you do is you. So do you even, who are you as a person if not the choices that you make and the actions that you do, right?
I think just because everything was for me at least, just because I'm my personality is this way because of how I was brought up or because of my genes, like that still doesn't stop me from like, making everyday decisions and choices.
Mm-hmm. So do
Yeah.
you accept that you're only the sum of your genetics and upbringings?
Yeah, I
Does
do.
that feel like you? Does that feel like that encapsulates everything you are? Like,
I think
I'm
so.
not sure if I do. Like, I don't
I
know.
think it does sum up who I am, but that's not anything, that's not a negative thing, Like I am
Yeah.
how
Okay.
I'm brought up and my genes, but I'm still me. I don't think that takes away from my identity at all.
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand that.
Are you suggesting like there's something more than just your upbringing and genes, or like something spiritual, or I don't know.
No, actually, but I think it's, that like I don't really believe in a soul, or
Yeah.
I find it difficult to believe like in spiritual things. But I also find it difficult to accept that we're only like, I mean, that we're only like the sum of causes, like or I don't even find it difficult to accept, but I think there's a difference between like accepting something and really believing it. When I do my, everyday actions, like I still think, even though I learned about determinism, like, some time ago, I still think I'm causing them, or that I'm, acting freely.
I don't know if it's really mutually exclusive. I don't know. Just, I guess I'm also finding it hard to accept that determinism and free will are that mutually exclusive. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe it does come like down to definitions or something.
So for next episode, we're gonna talk about fatalism. It's a similar thing to determinism, but different. But we'll
Yeah, the distinction's important. Yeah, so see you next week. We hope, as always, that you enjoyed the episode, that
yeah.
you learned something new in the School of Athens.
See you next
Bye.
week. Bye. Thank you for coming to our lesson.
We hope to see you again next week.